The council chamber of Verath Prime was, by all galactic standards, a masterpiece of anti-gravity engineering. 300 diplomats from 47 species floated in their designated zones, suspended by technology so refined it had been perfected over 6,000 years. The Cathari delegates hovered near the ceiling in their preferred low-pressure stratum, their gas-filled bodies undulating with each breath. The Morgothi delegation occupied the middle levels, their crystalline exoskeletons, their hardened exoskeletons, refracting the ambient light into prismatic displays, and there, clustered near the floor like stubborn bottom feeders, sat the human contingent. Actually sat, on chairs. Ambassador Tev'rak of the Xylothian Empire couldn't help but notice this peculiarity every single session, and every single time, it annoyed him more than the previous occasion. His own species had abandoned the concept of furniture, roughly 8,000 years ago when they'd mastered gravitic manipulation, yet here were the humans, newest members of the Galactic Coalition, barely 2 decades into their membership, dragging actual physical objects into a council chamber where such things were not only unnecessary, but frankly embarrassing. "I don't understand why they even bother," whispered Councillor Thexani, a Vorlaxian whose 4 eyes could rotate independently to ensure she never missed an opportunity to gossip. "Their gravity manipulation is primitive at best. Why not simply request a standard suspension field like everyone else?" Tev'rak's neck frills rippled with amusement, the Xylothian equivalent of a condescending chuckle. "Pride, my dear Thexani. Primitive species always cling to their crude methods, even when superior alternatives exist. Did you see their submission for the Engineering Symposium next month? They're actually proposing to demonstrate their so-called advancements in gravitational technology." "You're joking." "I wish I were. The humans, and I'm reading directly from their proposal here, want to showcase what they call revolutionary applications of controlled gravitational fields, as if they could teach us anything about gravity manipulation." Down below, the human delegation seemed blissfully unaware of the mockery drifting through the upper atmospheric layers. Ambassador Patricia Okonkwo, a woman whose silver hair was tied back in what humans called a bun, sat reviewing her notes with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she actually cared about the upcoming trade negotiations. Beside her, Dr. Yuki Tanaka fiddled with a small device that occasionally emitted a faint hum, probably some compensator to help him adjust to the chamber's standard 0.93 gravities. Poor thing. The session proceeded as these things always did. Tedious debates about tariff regulations. Endless discussions about mining rights in the outer spiral. Complaints about the Morgothi tendency to claim every asteroid field they stumbled across. Tev'rak was 3/4 asleep in his suspension field when the chamber's central AI announced the final agenda item. Proposal Gamma 773. Human request for symposium demonstration slot. Ambassador Okonkwo, you have the floor. Patricia stood, and oh, how quaint that was, actually having to use leg muscles to change elevation, and smiled with the kind of warmth that Tev'rak had learned to distrust over his 40 years in galactic politics. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly, despite her refusal to use the chamber's audio enhancement fields. "My team and I would like to request a demonstration slot at next month's Engineering Symposium. We believe we've made some interesting progress in gravitational manipulation that the broader galactic community might find useful." The chamber erupted in what could generously be called polite skepticism and more accurately be described as barely suppressed laughter. "Ambassador," Tev'rak said, not bothering to hide his amusement, "I mean no disrespect, but your species has been working with gravity manipulation for what, 200 years? We've had functioning anti-gravity for 60 centuries. What could you possibly show us that we haven't already perfected?" Patricia's smile didn't waver. "With respect, Counselor, that's exactly why we'd like to demonstrate. Fresh perspectives can sometimes yield surprising results." "Fresh perspectives," scoffed Crixel, a Horthian whose species had literally written the standard galactic textbook on gravitic engineering. "You mean primitive fumbling with forces you barely understand?" Dr. Tanaka stood then, and Tev'rak noticed several delegates lean forward slightly. The human scientist had a reputation for being even more stubborn than his ambassador, which was saying something. "Counselor Crixel," Tanaka said, his tone pleasant, but his eyes sharp behind his glasses, "would you say your anti-gravity systems are efficient, Efficient, Krixal's mandibles clicked in indignation. They're perfect. 0.9997% energy retention, graviton emission rates below detectable thresholds, and operational stability measured in decades without maintenance. Impressive, Tanaka nodded. And what's your maximum load capacity per cubic meter? 17 metric tons, standard measure. Operational range? Effective up to 20 meters from the generation source, obviously. Everyone knows gravitational fields decay with distance. Obviously, Tanaka repeated, and Tev'rak couldn't tell if the human was being sincere or sarcastic. Their facial expressions were so limited compared to species with proper emotive frills. And directionality? Krixal hesitated. Directionality? Can you make gravity go sideways? Or at an angle? Or generate multiple independent fields with different vectors in the same space? The chamber went quiet. Tev'rak's frills rippled with confusion because, well, why would anyone want to do that? Gravity went down. That was the entire point. You canceled it out to float, or you didn't. What possible use could there be for making gravity point in random directions? That's not how gravity works, Krixal said flatly. Actually, Tanaka replied. And oh no, Tev'rak knew that tone. He'd heard it from humans before, right before they said something incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant, and the terrifying thing was, you never knew which until it was too late. That's exactly how gravity works. Natural gravity, anyway. It doesn't care about our conventions. It doesn't go down because there is no universal down. It goes toward mass, in whatever direction that happens to be. Yes. Basic astrophysics. Thexani interrupted. We all understand orbital mechanics, Dr. Tanaka, but in practical applications, within artificial environments, gravity serves one purpose, to provide a stable reference frame. We've optimized for that purpose. You've optimized for stability, Patricia cut in. We've optimized for versatility. Versatility. Tev'rak couldn't help himself, is what primitive species claim when they can't achieve efficiency. Patricia's smile finally shifted, becoming something sharper. Counselor Tev'rak, I'm going to make you an offer. Give us our demonstration slot. Just 20 minutes. That's all we ask. If what we show you is nothing more than primitive fumbling, as you put it, then humanity will withdraw our request for expanded industrial zones in the Kepler sector and accept current limitations for the next 10 years. The chamber went deadly silent. The Kepler sector dispute had been going on for months. Humans wanted more space for their growing industrial base, while established species like the Xylothians, Horthians, and Vorlaxians wanted to keep the upstart newcomers contained. This was a significant concession. And if your demonstration is impressive, Tev'rak asked carefully, then we get our expanded zones, no further debate, and you admit publicly that maybe, just maybe, the humans aren't quite as primitive as you think. Tev'rak's frills went completely still, which was the Xylothian equivalent of a poker face, while his mind raced through the implications. There was no way the humans had actually developed anything revolutionary. Impossible. They were too new, too inexperienced, too human. This was free concessions for the price of sitting through a brief embarrassment. 20 minutes, he agreed. But I want it recorded, for posterity. Oh, absolutely. Patricia's smile was back to its warm setting, but something in her eyes made Tev'rak's stomach sack clench uncomfortably. For posterity. The symposium arrived faster than Tev'rak expected, which was unfortunate because he'd been rather enjoying the 3 weeks of anticipatory mockery that had spread through the diplomatic circles. Even the normally reserved Cathari had started making jokes about human furniture, which was saying something because the Cathari barely had a concept of humor. The demonstration was scheduled for the second day, in Exhibition Hall 7, a massive space normally used for showcasing new ship designs or industrial fabricators. Tev'rak arrived early, determined to get a good floating spot where he could watch the inevitable disaster unfold. The chamber was already filling up. Apparently word had spread about the humans' bold wager, and nobody wanted to miss the spectacle. The hall had been reconfigured into a large open area, completely empty, except for a small control station where Dr. Tanaka and 3 other humans. He recognized Diego Ferreira, the team's engineer, Amara Nikosi, their materials specialist, and Konstantin Volkov, who did something with quantum mechanics that Tev'rak had never bothered to understand, were performing final checks. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all configurations. Patricia's voice rang out across the hall, amplified by conventional speakers rather than gravitic fields because of course the humans had to be difficult about everything. Thank you for attending today's demonstration. We're going to show you 3 applications of our gravitational manipulation technology. I promise you, none of them involve furniture. A ripple of laughter, some genuine, most condescending, rolled through the crowd. First, Patricia continued, a simple proof of concept. Diego, if you would. Ferreira nodded and activated something on the control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tev'rak noticed something odd. A small metal sphere, roughly the size of his head, was floating in the center of the hall. Not unusual. Everyone had seen levitating objects before. But then the sphere started moving. Not drifting, not floating, but moving with purpose, tracing complex 3-dimensional patterns in the air. Loops, spirals, figure eights, all while maintaining perfect stability. Standard anti-gravity levitation. Crixall called out dismissively. We've had this for... The sphere suddenly shot sideways at incredible speed, stopped on a micron, reversed direction, accelerated straight up, then down, then began orbiting an empty point in space like a planet around an invisible star. It was moving in ways that defied every convention of anti-gravity technology Tev'rak had ever seen. Accelerations that should have destabilized the field, direction changes that should have caused the object to tumble, all executed with impossible precision. That's not levitation, Tanaka said quietly, his voice somehow carrying across the now silent hall. That's localized gravitational vector manipulation. We're not canceling Earth's gravity and letting the object float. We're creating multiple independent gravitational fields with different vectors and magnitudes, essentially telling that sphere which direction is down and changing that direction hundreds of times per second. The sphere began to move faster, its path becoming increasingly complex, weaving between invisible obstacles, executing what could only be described as aerobatic maneuvers without any visible means of propulsion. Interesting parlor trick, Thexani managed, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. But what's the practical application? Patricia's grin could have powered a small station. I was hoping you'd ask. Amara, let's show them application number 2. Nkosi stepped forward, carrying what looked like a standard cargo container, the kind used on every freighter in the galaxy, roughly 2 meters on each side, and according to the strain in her movements, quite heavy. This container, Amara said, setting it down with an audible thud that resonated through the hall, weighs approximately 4,000 kilograms. Standard density measurements confirm it's filled with solid titanium carbide composite. Now watch closely. She tapped a control pad on her wrist, and the container, well, it didn't exactly float. It sort of hung there, suspended in mid-air, but something was different about it. Tev'rak had seen millions of objects in anti-gravity fields. They had a certain quality to them, a kind of serene floating that came from being freed from gravitational influence. This container didn't have that quality. It looked locked in place, as if it was resting on an invisible shelf that just happened to be 2 meters off the ground. Standard anti-gravity, Crixall said again, but he sounded less certain now. Heavy load, admittedly, but well within established parameters for... Amara tapped her pad again, and the container rotated 90 degrees, not tumbling, not drifting. It rotated as if someone had grabbed it and turned it, crisp and controlled. Then it moved horizontally, accelerating smoothly to what Tev'rak estimated was at least 30 meters per second, then stopped instantly without any oscillation or drift. Now here's where it gets fun, Amara said, and Tev'rak was beginning to really hate that particular smile humans got when they were about to make everyone else feel stupid. Diego, send in the obstacle course. The far wall of the exhibition hall opened, and a series of structures began extending into the space. Pillars, platforms, narrow gaps, rotating barriers, the kind of setup you'd use to test navigation systems or pilot reflexes. It looked like a maintenance nightmare waiting to happen. The container began moving through the course, and it was fast. Not just fast, it was moving with the kind of precision that Tev'rak associated with military targeting systems, threading through gaps that left barely centimeters of clearance on either side, rotating on multiple axes simultaneously to slip through spaces that should have been impossible. accelerating and decelerating in ways that would have torn apart anything relying on conventional propulsion. At one point, it went completely vertical, oriented perpendicular to the floor, and continued navigating as if this was the most natural thing in the world. That's impossible," someone whispered, and Tev'rak realized with a start that it had been him. "The energy requirements alone," Krixol sputtered, his mandibles clicking rapid fire in what Tev'rak recognized as extreme agitation. "The field coherence necessary to maintain stability during those accelerations, the processing power to calculate vector changes that rapidly, your equipment must be enormous, probably filling 3 decks of your ship, drawing enough power to—" "Actually," Diego interrupted cheerfully, holding up a device roughly the size of Tev'rak's hand, "this is it. The entire system generates and controls up to 50 independent gravitational fields simultaneously, each with individually adjustable vector and magnitude. Power draw is about 40 kilowatts during heavy operation, runs on a standard fusion cell that'll last roughly 6 months of continuous use." The hall erupted in chaos, delegates floating, hovering, or in the humans' case, standing, all shouting questions at once. Tev'rak couldn't move, couldn't think. His entire understanding of gravitational manipulation was being rewritten in real time. Silence. The voice belonged to High Counselor Vrakseth, a Morgothi elder whose species had pioneered antigravity technology 4,000 years ago, and who was absolutely not accustomed to being technologically surprised. "Explain. Now. How is this possible?" Tanaka stepped forward, and Tev'rak noticed he wasn't smiling anymore. He had the serious expression of a teacher about to deliver a lesson that would hurt. "Your anti-gravity technology," Tanaka began, his voice cutting through the stunned quiet, "is based on graviton field cancellation. You generate a field that opposes natural gravity, creating a null zone. It's elegant, it's efficient, and it works beautifully for its intended purpose. But it's limited because you're always working against gravity, canceling it out, trying to reach zero." He paused, making sure everyone was following. They were. You could have heard a feather fall, except feathers would have been floating. "We took a different approach. We don't cancel gravity, we create it. Directional gravitational fields, as strong or weak as we need, pointing in any direction we choose. That container isn't floating, it's falling. It's in a constant state of free fall toward a gravitational source that we're moving through space. From the container's perspective, it's always experiencing one standard gravity pulling it toward our generated field. We just happen to be moving that field wherever we want the container to go." "That's insane," Vrakseth said slowly. "The computational requirements, the energy density, the field generation technology. Even if the theory is sound, the engineering challenges would be substantial," Patricia agreed. "Took us about 8 years to crack. The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to make gravity go away and started asking what would happen if we could make it go anywhere we wanted. Turns out, once you solve the directional generation problem, everything else is just mathematics and engineering." 8 years, Krixol repeated weakly. 8 years to surpass 6 millennia of established research. "Well," Patricia said, and was that sympathy in her voice that somehow made it worse. "You spent 6 millennia perfecting one approach. Very understandable. When something works, why change it? We spent 8 years knowing our approach didn't work at all, so we had to try everything." Konstantin Volkov spoke up for the first time, his accent thick but his words precise. "His advantage of being primitive, yes, we have no established doctrine to defend, no legacy systems to maintain compatibility with, just problem to solve and no preconceptions about correct solution." Tev'rak wanted to argue, wanted to point out the flaws, the limitations, the reasons why the traditional approach was superior, but his mind kept circling back to that cargo container, executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. 4,000 kilograms, moving like a fighter craft, controlled by a device that fit in one hand. "Application number 3, Patricia said, and Tev'rak's stomach sack dropped because there was more, "is what we're really excited about. Everything you've seen so far is proof of concept. Yes, our system works, yes, it's more versatile than conventional anti-gravity, but the real question is, what can you do with it?" The container returned to its starting position and settled gently to the floor. The obstacle course retracted. For a moment, the exhibition hall was completely empty again. Then the floor opened up. A massive object rose from below. A ship, or part of one, Tev'rak realized. It was clearly human construction, all hard angles and practical design, roughly 50 meters long and bristling with equipment he couldn't immediately identify. It settled in the center of the hall, taking up most of the available space. This, Diego said proudly, running his hand along the hull, is the prototype heavy cargo transport Sisyphus, completely unarmed, no weapons, no shields. We're not trying to militarize this demonstration. What she does have is our gravitational manipulation system scaled up to industrial capacity. Amara tapped her controls, and a section of the ship's hull irised open. Inside, Tev'rak could see a cargo bay that looked normal, standard containers, standard loading configuration. Nothing special except, "Wait," Thexani said, all four eyes focusing intently. "Those containers are stacked wrong. That configuration would be unstable in any standard gravity field. The weight distribution is all." The ship rotated. Not the ship moving in space. The entire ship rotated 90 degrees on its axis, and the cargo inside didn't shift even slightly. Then it rotated again, and again, tumbling through orientations that should have sent every container crashing into the bulkheads. "There is no wrong configuration," Diego explained, "because there's no consistent gravity inside the hold. Each container is held in place by its own independent gravitational field. We can stack them in any arrangement that fits the geometry, regardless of weight distribution, and they stay exactly where we put them. No magnetic clamps, no tie-downs, no shifting during maneuvers. But that's just the beginning." Patricia cut in, her enthusiasm finally breaking through her diplomatic composure. "Show them the cargo transfer, Diego." The Sisyphus moved, slid, really, until it was positioned next to the wall of the exhibition hall. A standard cargo hauler, this one clearly borrowed from the station's logistics fleet, had been positioned on the other side. The two ships were separated by roughly 30 meters and a solid wall. "Transfer sequence initiating," Diego announced. Containers began appearing in the Sisyphus's hold. Not being carried in, not floating in through the cargo door, they just appeared, sliding through the solid wall as if it wasn't there. Tev'rak's frills stood completely erect in shock. "You're teleporting cargo?" "No," Tanaka said, laughing openly now, not at them, Tev'rak realized, but with the sheer joy of proving something everyone said was impossible. "We're creating a gravitational corridor through the wall. The containers are falling along a path that happens to pass through solid matter. Gravity doesn't care about walls. Why should our cargo?" "The energy requirements," Vrakseth started, "are significant," Constantine admitted. "This is the power-intensive part, but is still less energy than opening airlock, extending loading arm, cycling atmosphere, doing physical transfer, retracting arm, closing airlock, and is much faster. We can fully load 500 container ship in under 10 minutes. The demonstration continued for another 5 minutes, showcasing capabilities that made Tev'rak's head spin. Rapid reorientation for docking at any angle, precision maneuvering in crowded space, emergency cargo jettison that could scatter containers across a cubic kilometer of space in seconds, and perhaps most impressively, gravitational shielding that could deflect incoming micrometeoroids by simply making them fall around the ship. When it finally ended, the exhibition hall remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Tev'rak floated there, his mind churning through implications he didn't want to acknowledge. This wasn't just a better mousetrap. This was a fundamental shift in how cargo handling, station construction, and space logistics would work. The humans hadn't improved on existing technology. They'd made it obsolete. "So," Patricia said into the silence, her voice gentle but firm, "about those industrial zones in the Kepler sector." Tev'rak's frills rippled in what he absolutely refused to acknowledge as defeat. "The council will need to review." "The wager was clear, Counselor," Vrakseth interrupted, and bless the old Morgothi, there was respect in his voice now. "They demonstrated revolutionary applications of controlled gravitational fields. The humans have earned their expanded zones, and we have earned a valuable lesson in humility." "We're not trying to humiliate anyone," Patricia said quickly. "Honestly, we're hoping to license the technology, share the research, get as many species working on applications as possible. This is too useful to keep to ourselves." "Why?" The question burst out of Tev'rak before he could stop it. You could have kept this secret, used it for competitive advantage, leveraged it for political power. Why demonstrate it publicly? Patricia smiled, and for the first time, it seemed completely genuine, without any of that sharp edge that made Tev'rak nervous. Because that's not how humans work, counselor. We're loud, we're proud, and when we figure something out, we want everyone to know about it. What's the point of being clever if you can't show off a little? Tanaka nodded, grinning behind his glasses. Plus, frankly, we got tired of everyone assuming we were stupid just because we're new. Figured it was time to make a point. Message received, Crixall said dryly. Though Tev'rak noticed the Horthian was already pulling up technical specs on his datapad. I assume you'll be publishing the fundamental principles. Full technical documentation drops in 3 days, Diego confirmed. Fair warning, the math gets weird. We had to develop entirely new frameworks for describing multivector gravitational fields. Your physicists are going to have fun. As the crowd began dispersing, still buzzing with excited conversation and frantic note-taking, Tev'rak floated over to where Patricia was packing up her materials. She looked up as he approached, one eyebrow raised in question. I owe you an apology, he said, his frills settling into a pattern that indicated sincere contrition. I underestimated your species. Badly. You really did, Patricia agreed. But she was smiling. But you know what? That's okay. We're used to it. Been the underdogs so long we've gotten pretty good at the dramatic reveal. Those chairs, Tev'rak said suddenly. In the council chamber. You don't need them, do you? You could have standard suspension fields. Patricia laughed. A warm sound that somehow made Tev'rak's embarrassment slightly more bearable. Oh, we absolutely don't need them. But you know what? Sometimes it's useful to let people underestimate you. They get comfortable, stop paying attention, start making assumptions, and then you hit them with something like this. Exactly. She extended her hand in the human gesture of respect, and Tev'rak carefully wrapped 3 digits around it. Besides, the chairs are comfortable. Why float when you can sit? As Tev'rak made his way back to his diplomatic quarters, he couldn't help but notice that the humans were, even now, sitting on their chairs in the post-demonstration reception area, drinking something that smelled vaguely toxic, and laughing about something one of them had said. They looked so casual, so unconcerned with galactic opinion, and yet they'd just changed everything. His datapad chirped with an incoming message from the Xylothian High Command. The content was brief and to the point. Acquire human gravitational technology. Priority Alpha. Cost irrelevant. Tev'rak glanced back at the humans one more time, watching Patricia Okonkwo explain something to a cluster of fascinated Cathari delegates, while gesticulating enthusiastically with what appeared to be her 3rd glass of that toxic beverage. They'd laughed at human gravity tech, dismissed it as primitive fumbling by an upstart species who didn't know their place in the galactic order. And now the entire council was going to be scrambling to catch up, to understand, to implement technology that the humans had developed in less than a decade. His frills rippled in what he was finally willing to admit was genuine amusement. The humans hadn't just hit the floor, they'd changed which direction floor pointed, how fast you fell toward it, and whether walls meant anything at all. And they'd done it while sitting in chairs, drinking terrible beverages, and smiling like they'd known exactly how this would end all along. Maybe, Tev'rak thought as he submitted his report recommending immediate approval of the Kepler sector expansion, humanity's real gift wasn't gravitational manipulation at all. Maybe it was their absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible, just because someone else had already decided it couldn't be done. Primitive species, indeed.